Hello everybody, and welcome back to Aero League Racing Tier 2. My name is Aman, and you all join me today for the Hungarian Grand Prix. Only a bit longer now until we get the session underway, so until then, be sure to get yourselves comfortable, maybe grab something to eat or drink, maybe grab a loved one, and we should be getting started very soon. Hello, Saeed. Good to see you as always. Yeah, it's great to be back, man. I was unfortunately very sick last week around. I'm still not entirely recovered, so in case you guys hear me coughing over the stream, I would like to apologize in advance. I'll try not to let it get too much in the way, but yeah, great to be back. And while I'm here and while we're talking, why not get a chance to talk about the current standings of Tier 2 at the current moment? So Bambino obviously leads this championship following back-to-back wins with 61 points. We have Jack as a reserve driver currently in P2 in the championship with 46 points, followed by Dax, another reserve driver who's also fighting for the championship lead, currently in P3 with 40 points. In P4 we have DDK, and in P5 we have Jim with 28 points. And the rest of the top 10 would be Jaguar, Alu, RVL Volcano, Perzemu, Haggis, and yeah, that will round off your top 10 in your constructor standings. Looking at that's the driver standings. Looking at the constructor standings at the moment, Mercedes currently lead the championship with 62 points, with Ferrari right behind them with 46 points. In P3 we have AlphaTauri with 36 points. In P4 we have Williams with 33, and P5 goes to Red Bull with 26 points. The rest of the top 10 would include McLaren, Aston Martin, Alpine, Alfa Romeo, and Haas in that order. What's cracking, bro? Good to see you. Welcome to the stream. But yeah, let's talk a bit about this track. So Hungary, obviously a track not extremely high demanding in top speed. However, you do have the first and second DRS zones currently following one after the other. So it'll be interesting to see how drivers will be taking an approach in terms of setup, in terms of tire strategies heading into this race. Obviously, we do have 35 laps around here, and it's going to be a relatively long race. Lap times are... We'll see what lap times are, I guess. I'm currently carrying Williams down. Maybe it's time to find... Maybe... I don't know, man. There's in the top three, two of the top three drivers are currently still reserve drivers. I think, you know, if your teammate is dropping out or anything, maybe you can have a word with one of them to help join you and bring Williams back up to its glory. But yes, quite an interesting track layout at Hungary, and obviously 35 laps around here. The walls being extremely close to the track on certain sectors, so it'll be interesting to see if there's going to be the inclusion of a safety car midway through this race. Fawn has been busy, but I won't blame him too much. Understandable. Yeah, Fawn's always been a bit busy when it comes to F1 and stuff, but I'm sure whenever he will get a chance to race, he will make you proud. You just don't want to bend it in quali like you did at Monza. That makes sense. I unfortunately didn't get a chance to tune into or let alone commentate a race at Monza. It was one of the races I was looking forward to commentating on, but unfortunately never got around to it. But yeah, it's a track very different from Monza this time around. Hopefully you don't bend it in quali, and we'll be keeping an eye on you as well through the race to see how you progress through the session as well, of course. Yeah, just a bit longer now, ladies and gentlemen, and I think we should be getting started very, very soon. I don't think we're waiting on a whole lot of other people, as Will the Game has just joined us. So just a few more minutes now, and we should be getting started with qualifying very, very soon. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, we have gotten confirmation from Bang Everett said that we're all set to get the Hungarian qualifying underway. A long race in store for us all today, so I hope we're all comfy and we're all settled in for what should be an overall exciting race. Tier 2 hasn't proven to disappoint us yet with the fantastic racing that they've been putting on, especially near the front of the grid, so I'm sure we'll be in store for some great, excellent racing as well for today as well. Well, it's unfortunately your worst track. Yeah, I'm not too sure. A whole lot of drivers are extremely happy with a track like this. I know a lot of them struggle when it comes to good, at least good wheel-to-wheel racing on a track like this. But I'm still hopeful, at least. At least I'll try to be for some great racing and what we have in store for us today. Not consistent here. Ah, I see. I mean, understandably, if it's qualifying times, that obviously it'll hinder you a lot in. But I think, granted that you have the right setup, I think you might be looking forward to gaining a whole lot of positions here out on track mid-race if you don't find your qualifying start. But I'm sure you'll be okay. Alright, so making sure all our lap data and everything is completely available to us. And now then, who will be the first driver to head out on track? That is the big question. Obviously no activity in the garage just as of yet. And it doesn't seem like there's really any mechanics coming out to signify that anybody's going to start heading out anytime soon. Keep an eye on the garage, and we do have some activity from the McLaren pit window, and we'll take a look at who that may seem to be, and it is Przemu, who seems to be the first car out on track for today's session. So obviously we'll be riding on board with him as he's closely followed behind by a Williams. Is that Williams? Where is that Williams? Oh, there it is near the front of the grid. It is DDK. So we will be running on board with Przemu as he's going to hopefully run us through the first time lap of Hungary, assuming DDK doesn't get past him out on their out lap at the moment. But yes, this is a great chance for us to take a look at, and oh wow, actually DDK not wasting any time whatsoever, opting to be the first car out on track, so I guess we'll be riding on board with him instead. But yes, this is a great opportunity to take a first look at the track. So obviously Sector 2 and 3 are very tight and twisty. Is a very tight and twisty section where your downforce will definitely be tested. Sector 1 mainly being the first two DRS zones, but of course those presenting some great overtaking opportunities into some heavy braking zones. And as we ride on board with DDK, and he comes and he begins the Sector 3 lap, Sector 3 section of the lap, we should be looking for some pretty exciting qualifying session in store for us today, as we already have a yellow flag in Sector 2, and it seems to be the Mercedes getting out of the way possibly for the Aston Martin. It doesn't maybe seem the case. Regardless, we ride on board with DDK as he now sets the first time lap here at Hungary. Riding on board with him as he has his DRS wide open, heading down towards turn 1. Obviously, it doesn't look like there's a whole lot of traffic in front of him. He does have the McLaren of Przemu right behind him, and through that exit, a very solid, stable car by the looks of it. Obviously, the second DRS zone following immediately after the first. So, of course, there's, like we saw at Hungary, like we saw at Bahrain, where a lot of the drivers were trying to avoid crossing the line ahead of their opponent so that they could maintain that DRS advantage. And riding on board with DDK, he seems to get that fast left-hander absolutely spot on, not invalidating his lap time and avoiding that inside curve to spin out his car, heading through the chicane now, and a very nice and neatly taken chicane from him. And that's the main time killer here in Sector 2 at Hungary, at least. Not going over those chicanes properly will heavily hinder the rest of your lap and of course make you lose out on a ton of time. But now as he's catching up to Sector 3, the Red Bull driver getting out of the way nice and early as to prevent any invalidations to his lap time. Obviously setting a purple Sector 2, but that's also being because he's the only driver to go through Sector 2 at the moment. But of course, riding on board with DDK now, let's see what sort of times he can set on the board with the DRS wide open, heading down towards the line. He sets for himself a 1:16.5. And we'll take a look at how Przemu is going to counteract that argument. Comes across the line, sets a 1:17.05, tenths off the pace, unfortunately. So definitely a lot more improvement required from him. We can see that the Alpine of Saeed Al-Falassi now crosses the line with an unfortunately and horrendous time of a 1:21.8. Nothing special from him. And Zab, meanwhile, setting a 1:16.65, roughly a tenth down on DDK at the moment. And there's a bunch of drivers now coming towards their end of their runs. We have the AlphaTauri of Jim coming across the line, sets a 1:16.526, managing to take provisional pole away from DDK, and that's immediately taken up right back by Lixon Jack, who manages to set a 1:16.2, 3 tenths faster than the rest of the grid, and now manages to take provisional pole with his Mercedes. A fantastic drive from him. Let's take a look at what other people are setting. We can see Steba now crossing the line with a 1:16.1, managing to take away provisional pole from Jack. Meanwhile, the Cunning Fern in the Alfa Romeo, let's see what sort of times he can set for himself. Coming through the final corner out on track, he obviously has a 1:16.1 to beat, but it doesn't look like he's going to be able to do so. Comes across the line with a 1:18.7. Unfortunately, only good enough for P9 at the moment. You see Trems now, I believe, beginning his... Actually, never mind. Trems taking provisional pole now with a 1:16.0. I thought he was just beginning his run, but I was completely wrong there. And now the Red Bull of Trems obviously in provisional pole. We have a few drivers who are still currently out on track. We have P Shadow, of course, who is just about to begin his first timed run, and we have I'm gonna absolutely butcher this name. Nikudza. Nikudza is all right. All right, we're gonna roll with that one. Now coming through sector 2, setting a purple sector 2 by the looks of it with a 54.6. Had a massive slide turn 2. Oh. How unfortunate. It didn't look like it. Over the camera, it looked like you had your car pretty stable there. But now, of course, riding on board with the Alpine driver, currently in P15 with a 1:14 point... With a 1... No, unfortunately not good enough to take provisional pole. But he will slot himself very comfortably into P6 with a 1:16.5. And with that, by the looks of it, most of the drivers have now finished their first timed runs. We can see Bang Average Seb going very, very slowly. And Shadow, who was setting a time lap, is unfortunately retired out on track. It looks like there was some sort of a collision or incident involving him, and that's going to be the end of his qualifying, unfortunately. You hate to see it when it's your first timed run and you unfortunately invalidate your lap, but that is the case here. So now it's up to Bang Average Seb to make sure that he can carry his Ferrari teammate at least through qualifying and hopefully set himself up for what should be a promising race. Obviously, most of the drivers now have gone back into the pits to change their tire compounds and refuel their cars, preparing for their second runs. Meanwhile, we're right on board with Seb, who hasn't set a time lap at the moment. We'll see what sort of times he can set for himself and how far up he can compete with the rest of the grid. Obviously, no drivers right now currently in the sub 115s, 1:16.09 being the fastest time out on track at the moment. And now riding on board with Seb, we already have an idea of the first banker lap set by most of the drivers, so we'll keep an eye out to see how he fares in comparison to the rest of them. DRS wide open now, heading down towards turn 1. Obviously a hard braking zone here, presenting multiple overtaking opportunities, but in this case it's just a matter of keeping your car as stable as possible and heading right through the second DRS zone, following an immediate long left-hander with a fast right-hander right afterwards. And it's definitely an exciting track to race on, don't get me wrong, but of course there's just so many areas and so many rooms for so much room for error. The drivers are going to have to be extremely careful, as he did set a purple sector 1. So it looks like it's a very promising lap time from Seb. Now coming through the chicane, it seems like he's done a very good job avoiding those high curves. And we'll be seeing if he can maybe maintain a clean and a very precise lap through the rest of the track. Now coming towards the end of sector 2, and he has set himself a 54.6. Not good enough for a purple sector 2, unfortunately. But still, it doesn't seem like he's massively off the pace. That sector 1 may have been his saving grace. We'll have to see, as he's now coming through the final section and now inevitably the final corner out on track. So now then, what will Seb be able to set for himself as he barely avoids invalidating his lap time? Comes across the line, sets a 1:16.5, which it seems like the middle of the pack seems to be extremely close together there, with most of the drivers being separated by barely a tenth. As we have a few yellow flags out on track, one of them being the Mercedes, as he's getting out of the way for his teammate. And as we ride on board with Will and Jaguar, of course, both drivers who currently haven't set any lap times themselves, sitting P16 and 17 respectively. And will be able to fight near the front of the grid. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be the case. Sets a 1:18.0, is in fact fighting near the back of the grid, currently sitting in P13 with that time he just set. He's going to need to find roughly 2 seconds if he's looking to fight for provisional pole, but Jaguar now coming across the line, he manages to set himself a 1:15.7 and becomes one of the first drivers and becomes the first driver to enter the sub 115s, and that too by a considerable margin as well. Both the Red Bull drivers now taking P1 and P2 at the moment. Obviously, it's not far. The story is far from over. However, Steva currently now on his outlap, currently in P3 at the moment. Not to forget Lixon Jack, who is also out on his run, currently 2/10 up on his previous lap time, and he's only made it through Sector 1. Jack seems to be absolutely flying right now as he manages to avoid the spun out Alfa Romeo out on track. And I love this camera angle, this close up to show you just how fast these cars are going through that chicane. We have another yellow flag in Sector 2. It seems to be the same Alfa Romeo that was struggling earlier. I hope that wasn't Steba. It might actually have been Steba who lost his car there. Might have caught the inside curb. And unfortunately, that does tend to unsettle a lot of the drivers. Jack now, however, 3/10 up on his current lap time. Will need to find a bit more pace if he's looking to fight near the front of the grid. But we'll see if maybe if he can pull some rabbit out of his hat at this very last corner now. Coming through the final turn out on track. He does obviously get the slipstream advantage from the car in front of him. Comes across the line, sets a 1:15.8, becomes the second driver to enter the 1:15s. But unfortunately, he's just not fast enough, managing to only take P2 at the moment. You see DDK now also currently through his Sector 1 run, and is unfortunately 7.5 seconds down on his current lap time. Meanwhile, Steba, who has been unfortunately demoted to P5, now currently beginning his timed run as well. You can see Rigo actually out on track as well. I didn't realize Rigo was racing today. Currently in P7 with a 1:16.4, a very respectable time from him. Currently out on his 5-lap old softs by the looks of it, if that telemetry is correct, of course. Yes, at the moment, let's see what Rigo can set up for us as he comes through the second sector. Unfortunately, 1.2 seconds down on his lap time. It doesn't look very promising for him. We can see Jim roughly almost 5/10 up on his time. A bit more than that. Currently in P10 with a 1:16.5. A massive improvement here could put him right up at the top to fight with the content for the lead of the race. Assuming that he can keep this pace up and keep this momentum up towards the end of the lap. Now coming through the final corner now. DRS wide open, heading towards the line. Jim manages to set a 1:15.9. A fantastic lap time from him as he manages to promote himself up into P3. We see Steba now currently out on his run. Meanwhile, Nick Kudza, who did set a very nice lap time himself, currently one step ahead of his teammate by only a 10th as well. So we have another yellow flag in Sector 2. Seems to be the McLaren of it seems to be the McLaren of Jag Kings by the looks of it. And he does have his flashing light on, and it does seem to be that he's completely out of ERS as well. Coming towards the end of Sector 2, unfortunately, he's a 10.5 down on his time. It doesn't look like he's really going to be improving anytime soon. Samet, unfortunately, has invalidated his run. And Bang Average Seb, by the looks of it, has also just begun his first time run. Currently in P13, the Ferrari driver obviously will be looking better to place himself up near the front of the grid, but of course it doesn't help that his teammate, unfortunately, had to retire early on in the session. Only 5 minutes and 30 seconds left to go in this qualifying session. A lot of the drivers now finishing up with their second runs. And we can already see through 5 minutes and 30 seconds, currently Jaguar taking provisional pole with a 1:15.7. Jack and Jim, who are Mercedes and AlphaTauri respectively, currently sitting in P2 and P3. Jaguar not too far away from his teammate either. Trem's currently in P4, and of course DDK in P5 at the Williams. So far as carrying the Williams, according to him, and Seb managing to set a purple Sector 3. Sorry, a purple Sector 2. Fortunately, did not catch the timing sheets to see how much he was up by, but he will need a drastic improvement here if he's looking towards fighting near the front of the grid. Seb now coming across the line sets a 1:16.1, a very respectable time from him as it puts him in P6. And most of the drivers now, by the looks of it, seem to be back into the pits. Trems, on the other hand, is currently out on a run by the looks of it. Yes, he is. At the moment, P4 is only missing about 900ths of a second to try to get into the sub-115s. You're going to get disqualified later, starting from the big back? That makes sense. Here you go. Okay. And now we can see Trems 2.5 tenths up on his time with his fastest Sector 2. By the looks of it. Obviously, we said he only needed 900ths to get into the sub-115s, but now, keeping in mind, he only needs roughly 2.5 tenths if he's looking to fight for a provisional pole, which he might just be able to do. Trems now coming through the final corner, DRS wide open, comes across the line, sets a 1:15.9, and unfortunately, it sets the exactly identical lap time to Jim, very interestingly enough. But of course, Since Jim set the lap time first, he will be starting in P3, assuming that they stay in the, assuming that they don't change the timing sheets, they don't improve on their times throughout the session. But yeah, very interesting over there as Jim and Trem setting identical lap times to each other. I'm sure it'd be great to get a one-on-one perspective with both drivers on boards to see how they fare through the lap. But with only 3 minutes and 30 seconds left to go, most of the drivers currently still in the pits. It's either there's only a little while longer left before they'll be able to improve. We can see Prezemo being one of those drivers who's gone out a bit early to avoid the traffic, maybe to catch other drivers off guard and maybe get a chance to really promote himself up. Obviously sitting in P11 with a 116.5, and unfortunately the commentator's curse kicks in by the looks of it, and Prezemo loses his car and drives straight into the wall there. And unfortunately for him, that looks like it's going to be the end of his qualifying as he breaks his front wing. Unfortunate for him as he's having to drive over the grass there to avoid getting in the way of any of the other drivers. But that is going to be an unfortunate end to Prezemo's qualifying run. It seemed like he was going to be on a good run that time around as well. And we can see the ever so slow Cunning Ferns Alfa Romeo trying to avoid as much traffic as possible by the looks of it. We can see Jack now currently in P2, out for his outlap and about to begin it very, very soon. So why not ride on board with him? He's currently in P2 with a 1:15.8, roughly a tenth behind Jaguar. We'll need a bit more than a tenth and a bit more if he looks towards taking provisional pole away from the Red Bull driver. And now riding on board with Jack, DRS wide open, heading down towards turn 1. It doesn't seem to be he has a whole lot of traffic in front of him. He does have that Alpine of Said Al-Falasi, of who I'm assuming it is. And Said very kindly getting out of the way and not making sure not to invalidate Jack's lap time, as Jack has not shown himself through the corner there yet. There he is. I was wondering what happened to him. I had to just make sure that he hadn't spun out or anything. But yes, of course, Jack will need to set a lap time as soon as possible. Obviously, Jaguar and Jim now out on their runs. And coming through Sector 1, Jack seems to be half a tenth down on his current lap time. Not too sure if that's what you want to be seeing with only a few minutes left to go on the clock. But obviously, with the whole rest of the track to go, it's only we can see if... Oh, and Rigo actually setting a 1:15.4 completely out of nowhere. Said he was gonna disqualify himself and then start from the back of the grid. So we'll hope that he does do so. Jack, on the other hand, now coming towards the end of Sector 2, decides to abandon his current lap time, decides to possibly save his ERS to maybe go for a second run later on. That was a very late braking from him as he's trying to make room for the Alfa Romeo, and it seems like he's done so very nicely. As Rigo, I believe, has disqualified himself from the session. That's going to be the end of that. Managed to set a 15.4, which was the theoretical best lap time of the race of qualifying so far. But that looks like it. But we can see there's a whole lot of traffic here at the beginning of turn 1, at the end of Sector 3. But now riding on board with Jack. Let's see what Jack's able to do. Stable, unfortunately, disqualified from the session. That's going to be the end of his run. Now heading towards turn 1. Wait, what about Jaguar? Jaguar's just begun his run. Jack has begun his run. And Jim is a bit further down, so we'll ride on board with him. Roughly a tenth up on his current time. Damn it, Staba. Riding on board with Jim now, currently in P3 with a 1:15.9, being one of the only 4 drivers at the moment to be in the 1:15s. Obviously, he's going to need a bit more pace to fight near the front of the grid. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, time for qualifying has elapsed. And that is going to be the end of most of the drivers' qualifying runs. And this will be the final times that they'll be able to set for themselves. As Bang Average Seb manages to take provisional pole with a 1:15.707. And manages to... But will he be able to hold on to it? We'll have to see. Jim now coming through the final corner out on track and heading towards the line. What sort of times will Jim be able to set? Will he be able to take provisional pole? No, he will not. Sets a 1:15.8, and that's going to be the end of his run. Jaguar seems to have abandoned his lap by the looks of it, and it doesn't look like Jack is going to really be able to do anything either. Oh wow, Trem seems to be massively gone off track there, and that's going to look like it's the end of his run as well. DDK, on the other hand, also going incredibly slowly. He's also invalidated his run, and now it's Said coming across the line. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, that will be the end of qualifying here at Hungary. Bang Average Seb seemingly out of nowhere taking pole position for the start of this race with a 1:15.707. Jaguar in P2 in the Red Bull setting a 1:15.75. which is a very respectable lap time. We have Jim in P3 in the AlphaTauri with a 1:15.8, Jack in P4 with a 1:15.86, and Trems in P5 with a 1:15.9. All right, so then, ladies and gentlemen, we're all set to get the Hungarian Grand Prix underway. It doesn't look like there's going to be a formation lap. I don't think there is. So as soon as we get the go-ahead, and it seems like we're getting one right now, there's 5 red lights. It's lights out and away we go here at the Hungarian Grand Prix. And taking a look at Jaguar, he seems to get a fantastic run off the line, and he seems like he's already gotten past Seb, who's had an awful start to his race as he's dropping down multiple positions. And we can see Jim completely sending it into turn 1. Absolutely reckless driving from him as he resets back to track, and he's now in P1. Unfortunately, that is not allowed in the race, and he will most likely be getting penalized for that, especially heading into turn 1. We can see Jaguar now currently in P2, Jack back up to P3, and followed very closely behind by Trends and Bang Average Seb. Seb, of course, starting from provisional pole, but of course dropping down to P5 after a horrendous start by the looks of it. Looking down the rest of the grid, we can see Zab and Jack Kings going side by side with each other, and Zab managing to make the overtake, but unfortunately goes wide, and that allows the McLaren of Jack Kings to send it down the inside on the Ferrari of Shadow, and Shadow coming out ahead by the looks of it, ahead of the McLaren driver. Looking down the grid, we can see Saeed Al-Falasi trying to find a gap, trying to find a place to squeeze through, but unfortunately he's unable to at the moment. Very, very tight-knit racing. I'm not too sure about the start from Jim, as it did seem very, very sketchy. I'm pretty sure you're not allowed to do that, and I'm sure we're going to be seeing maybe a possible stewards report at the end of the race for that incident, but we'll be keeping an eye on that throughout the race. We can see Bang Average Seb, unfortunately, has dropped down as he's been involved in some sort of incident, as we can see his Ferrari car over there spun out onto the grass. Unfortunately, things going from bad to worse for the pole position sitter, as we look in the background there, and it seems to be Trends diving down the inside of Jack. We talked about how turn 1's a heavy braking zone, allowing a ton of overtaking opportunity, and no better example than over there as Trends manages to get past him and promotes himself up into P3. Obviously, Jack not relenting off of him for just 1 second. Is going to try to stick as close to the Red Bull driver as possible. And while we have the chance, let's take a look at the tires most of the drivers are running. So P1 to P3, obviously running the medians. Jack being the only driver by the looks of it in the top 8 to be running the hard. running the hard compounded tires. We obviously have Jack Kings in P9 running the softs, and then Saeed in P10 also running the mediums. So we'll be seeing how this alternate strategy pays off for Jack. Obviously at the moment not entirely working out to his advantage. He's currently sitting in P4. So I'm sure as the race progresses and those tires get slowly and slowly more warmed up, we'll be looking at him climbing through the ranks. Where else is some interesting action taking place? Looking down the grid, we can see Jack King's getting extremely close to Shadow over there, as we can get a chance that lap 17 to 23 is the expected pit window for the medium runners, as Jim sets the fastest time. No, never mind, Trem sets the fastest time of the race with a 1:19.2. So we obviously saw lap 17 was around when most of the drivers will be looking towards pitting. We'll see if anyone's looking to make the overcut or undercut, as the DRS has now been enabled for this lap. And we see Jack King getting pushed along now by Saeed by the looks of it. Obviously no DRS heading through the first two DRS sections in this race. But the next time they'll be coming around, they'll definitely have that extra top speed advantage on each other. And at the current moment, it seems to be Jim who's actually managing to pull away from Jaguar roughly. It seemed like he managed to get out of the gap for just about a second. But now he's back out of it again once again. So Jim and Jaguar definitely fighting to stay within each other's DRS range. Obviously Trems is going to be trying to utilize having to take DRS off of his teammates so that they can pull each other along, hopefully. Assuming that's the team orders there at Red Bull. We'll have to see as the race progresses. We'll keep an eye out there if there's really any team orders at Red Bull. Riding on board with DDK though, currently in P5, only 4.5 tenths behind Jack at the moment. Obviously DDK on the fresher set of compounded tires and the faster set of compounded tires, and with DRS now wide open as he's gaining on Jack, and he's massively gaining on Jack heading into turn 1. Will he set a dive on? He absolutely will. Sends it down the inside. Jack with the switch around manages to retain that possession and promotes himself right back up into P4. Fantastic racing from Jack there. Very intelligent move from him as he manages to get the switch back and manages to stay in P4. And we can now see Nikudza and Samet now side by side with each other. Samet around the outside with the Haas. Unfortunately, unable to make the move stick. Stays in P7 at the moment. And Nikudza staying in P6. Hello, Nocturne. Good to see you as always. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, lap 4 of 35. No first lap incidents, at least no massive ones, other than obviously we saw Seb spinning out earlier. And thankfully for us, it doesn't seem like there's really any chance of a safety car, at least not anytime soon, though I wouldn't hate to jinx it for us. You order KFC, can you get me some? We'll bring our attention back up to the front of the grid. DDK obviously 4.5 tenths now down on Jack. We saw how he sent it down into turn 1, and unfortunately Jack didn't play the switch around and didn't manage to make the move right back onto him. But now we'll see if this changes DDK's approach, heading now into turn 1. Once again, he's a bit far back, but we saw him make a dive bomb heading into turn 1 last time, and he's done the exact same thing here. This time more side by side, as there's a bit of contact between both the drivers, and who's going to come out ahead? It seems to be DDK at the moment, who has come out ahead after that contact, has managed to promote himself up into P4, and Jack drops down into P5. However, a very interesting development is up the grid. We can see Trends and Jaguar now extremely close together. Both the Red Bull drivers only separated by roughly 3.5 tenths. And we can see Jim has massively begun to pull away. 2.5 seconds is the gap to P2 at the moment. Obviously, Jaguar would hate to be the one to hold up his teammate, but then also would hate to be the one to increase this gap to Jim and allow Jim to run away from this. But of course, you never really know when it comes to F1. A safety car at any moment could turn things around for a lot of these drivers. However, with lap 5 of 35 and so much of the race left to go still, it's hard to say if that's actually something that's going to happen. But someone who's seemed to be making a comeback now, Shadow, who started near the back of the grid, actually may have put up a very respectable fight, and now is currently up to P8 at the moment, ahead of Saeed. Obviously, Saeed will have DRS heading onto the Ferrari at this current moment, but at the back we have some very interesting racing going on over here, as Italiano Rigo Jack Kings and Stable all coming into a battle of their own, and Stable managing to get past Jack Kings, but will he be able to send it down the inside of Rigo? It seems like he's going to be attempting to make that move, but unfortunately has massive amounts of contact with the Mercedes driver, and that seems to have hindered Rigo severely as he's dropped down into P11. Hopefully both drivers managed to escape from this incident without any sort of damage, but Stable, obviously that wasn't exactly the cleanest move from him, but it does seem to work, so we'll see how this race progresses for them and if they have any damage from that incident. Meanwhile, DDK has actually managed to catch up to both Jaguar and Trems. So if just for one incident, DDK could manage to take P2, assuming that he can manage to get past both the Red Bull drivers, which I can't imagine will be the easiest thing to do. Well, we do have a bit of a DRS train now beginning to form from P2 all the way down to P5. And as much of the attention as I'd like to be giving the midfield as well, with how close they all are to each other, this is a very interesting development here as Jaguar is seemingly struggling, and Trems now roughly 2.5 tenths now behind his teammate with DRS wide open. I doubt he's really going to hinder or stop his teammate heading into turn 1. It doesn't look like he's going to be able to, but will Jaguar be able to defend from DDK? DDK unfortunately a bit too far back on this occasion. Will need to stick behind the Red Bull driver at least for now, but with the DRS flap open heading down into the second DRS zone, he's going to look towards diving down the inside, and he's forced Jaguar into going a bit wide there. And now with the outside line, will DDK be able to make this overtake stick? He's not going to be able to, and Jaguar forcing the Williams to go a bit wide there. DDK is going to have to concede and stay in P4 at the moment. There was a great overtaking opportunity available over there. Unfortunately for DDK, Jaguar did close the door on him, and now heading down towards the chicane. Will DDK send it down the inside? No, he will not. This racing has heavily allowed Jack to massively catch up to the rest of the pack as well, and he has a great front row seat in seeing how this action is unfolding in front of him. Obviously 4.5 tenths down on the current lap time, 4.5 tenths down on the drivers ahead of him, and now we can see DDK was looking towards diving down the inside, but once again Jaguar absolutely shutting that door down, trying to give Trems a bit of a cushion so he can try to pull away at least and prevent DDK from catching up to him, who seems to be on an absolute roll at the moment. Jim, of course, now 4.5 seconds ahead of Trems, and now with DRS wide open, DDK is going to look to maybe making an overtake on Jaguar, who does have DRS himself. Jaguar goes defensive with the inside line, and now DDK around the outside will be trying to make this move stick, but of course with that inside line, Jaguar seems to have gotten the better traction out of that corner and will stay in P3, protecting his teammate and allowing his teammate to get a bit more of a cushion, assuming Trems can now begin to slowly pull away. Lap 8 of 35, not even 10 laps through this race, and we've already had a bunch of overtakes and a bunch of action, especially in the top 5 section of the drivers, obviously excluding Jim at the moment. And now Jack, we can see how interested he's becoming, trying to push DDK along to show him that he's not willing to wait around just because he can't make the overtake stick. So now obviously DDK has the difficult task of being sandwiched between a between a Red Bull and a Mercedes. We saw that he was worried for himself, and because of his inconsistent performances throughout practicing for this race. But now this is where you really need to be as laser focused as possible, and Jack closing that gap between both drivers, trying to get as close as possible to make this overtake stick. And now we can see DDK now trying to tuck into the slipstream of Jaguar, sending it down the inside. Jaguar once again making it a defensive move. And now DDK, who was a lot further ahead through the corner this time around the outside, manages to get the move done and does manage to promote himself up into P3. And we can see Nikudza and Jack now coming into a battle of their own. The Alpine trying to go around the outside of the Mercedes driver. And it seems like what a fantastic move from Nikudza that was, as he manages to promote himself up into P5, going around the outside of Jack. Fantastic racing there from the Alpine driver. Seemingly came out of nowhere, but he seemed to have gone a much better exit out of that corner. Ooh, and we do have a yellow flag in Sector 1. It seems to be the Aston Martin of Zabs, who seems to be going to the pits at the moment. Luckily for us, it doesn't seem like that's going to cause a safety car, so drivers can continue to race very comfortably. Looking down the grid, we can see Saeed getting extremely close to Shadow as we have another yellow flag in Sector 1. We see Jack now not letting Nikudza go at all. 8-lap-old softs with those 8-lap-old mediums. Obviously now it's about the halfway point of life of a little bit less than the halfway life of half point for the mediums, which will inevitably of course begin to slowly fall off. But of course Jack now unfortunately losing a bit of time through those final few corners and is unfortunately way too far back to really be fighting for anything. Meanwhile, we can see Saeed and Shadow coming into a battle of their own, and Rigo completely out of nowhere sending it down the inside of Saeed and managing to make that move stick, promoting himself up into P9. Oh, and we can see Shadow, of course, also going extremely wide into that corner, and we could see Rigo trying to take advantage of the situation, and right now it seems to be doing the exact same thing as he thought about maybe diving around the outside, but he's trying to force Shadow into some sort of mistake over here, and Rigo very late on the brakes there. As we saw, he completely missed the apex, but now he's going to need to brake extremely carefully as to not send it down the back end of Shadow, which he's done so very nicely, and Shadow actually struggling on the exit of that tire. So on the exit of that corner, so maybe potentially wearing his rear tires off a lot more than he would have hoped so far. Of course, now 25 laps left to go in this race. We saw that drivers with the medium tires will be pitting around lap 17 to 21, so we'll be around them, or it will be around then. I think we'll be looking at when some of these drivers' positions will begin to swap around. And obviously riding on board with Jack now as he's coming through the final corner with his hards. And DRS wide open as he's trying to catch up to his teammate as much as possible. And what's interesting is Trends has actually managed to pull away very, very nicely from DDK and has actually managed to bring the gap down to Jim significantly. So we saw that the gap was seemingly increasing earlier, but now the gap's now down to roughly 5.5 seconds. And that gap also coming down ever so slowly as DDK's gap to Trends now slowly beginning to increase, which does leave an open opportunity for Jaguar to maybe get close to him right before the DRS straight and use the DRS to his advantage to overtake the Williams driver. We see the Cunning Fern in the currently P16, who's now entered the pits. Switch on to a fresh set of mediums. Obviously, some of these drivers being a bit hopeful for a safety car as well. But what's very interesting to note is that there's only 4 drivers currently out on track who are on the hard run, or who are running the hards. That being Jack, Rigo, and Steba, of course, and not to mention Jack Kings, who is on a fresh set of hards, as a matter of fact, only making his pit stop roughly 4 laps earlier. Now Saeed getting extremely close to Shadow, and with DRS wide open, Shadow of course also has DRS himself, but that is also allowing Saeed to catch up massively. Saeed thought about diving down the inside, but things better off it as Shadow locks up heading out of turn 1, and DRS once again wide open once again. And will he be able to send it down the inside? Unfortunately not. Saeed is going to play it very reserved. He decides to stick back behind the Ferrari for now, but he's getting a massive run out of these corners by the looks of it, and a fantastic run indeed. Saeed manages to make the move stick and promotes himself up into P9 as Shadow had looked like lost his car, and that's going to drop him down into P11. So things going from bad to worse for the Ferrari drivers. Unfortunately, we can see Bangaver Seb now back up to P13 after starting on pole position. What happened to Tier 4 racing? I have no idea. Not my department chief, I'll be very honest. I wouldn't be surprised if the race is still happening, but there's just no commentator available as well. There's also a very strong possibility that that's just the case. Ooh. It seems like Salmon has been involved in some sort of incident. He slowed down massively, and it seems like we have a virtual safety car out on track. I'm not too sure why. And a few of the drivers now bolting straight into the pits. Jaguar and Nikudza all heading straight into the pits with the opportunity that's presented itself. And unfortunately for Jim, Trends, DDK, and Jack, it looks like they're going to miss out on that on this free pit stop under the virtual safety car conditions. And what a fantastic stop this was for Jaguar, who switched now onto the soft tire compounds. Don't think those are going to be making it to the end, but it'll be an interesting take on it'll be interesting to see what's this take on strategy as the race continues. Nikudza also switching over to the fresh set of mediums. We can see Saeed switching over to a fresh set of hards at the moment. And under the virtual safety car conditions, obviously drivers are not allowed to go full speed and they have to slow their cars down massively. They don't have to bunch up with each other as they normally would have to do under a safety car, but in these conditions we're just waiting for green flags, which I think should be flying out any second now. And here they are, green flags. So we are now back under racing conditions as Bagger 7 unfortunately picks up a drive-through penalty for speeding under the virtual safety car. So things really going bad for worse for the Ferrari team, as they're being the only team out on the track at the moment that do have a set of penalties. Meanwhile, keeping our eye on Steva, who did get a chance to pit, of course, only has Saeed in front of him with his fresh hards. Steva being currently out on the advantageous tires. Not to forget Jaguar, who was fighting near the front of the grid, has now switched over to the softs and does have Przemu straight ahead of him. And already you can just tell the tire difference between both these drivers. Jaguar is going to be trying to wait for a golden opportunity to present himself. He's going to obviously have to stay a bit patient, but he's pushing that McLaren along, essentially. And now heading down towards turn 1 with DRS wide open. I don't think really there's much Przemu could be doing here to save himself here. But Jaguar now side by side with Przemu, and of course with the better tire advantage, does manage to make the move stick and promotes himself up into P6. We can see Steva and Saeed coming into a battle of their own. Steva managing to promote himself before the corner even begins up into P9 with his tire advantage as well. And an interesting move there. DDK has actually managed to close the gap to Trems significantly. Obviously the front 5 being the only drivers currently out on moment, minus P7 at the moment, who didn't come in for their pit stops. So the top 5 are kind of stranded out there right now, but we'll see if things progress in their favor. As we can see now, DDK trying to bring that gap down between him and Trems to within a second, so he can utilize that DRS advantage heading down the main 2 straights. And stay within his DRS. It seems like he has done. DDK now with his DRS flap wide open, trying to catch up to Trems. It seems like the first pit straight seems to be a bit too short for him at the moment. However, now with the second DRS zone, he may be able to close that gap even further, as Jaguar sets the fastest lap time of the race with a 1:19.2. Fantastic lap time from him. Still a massive gap between most drivers, but Saeed not done with Steva just as yet. Steva going extremely defensive heading into turn 1, and now Saeed trying to send it around the outside of Steva, but Steva with that inside line manages to retain possession, but Saeed trying to do the switchback. Where did Steva's car just go? Huh? Did Steva's car just teleport in front of Saeed? It seems to be the case, but the gap between both the drivers still showing out to be roughly a 1/10 and a half. I'm not too sure what happened there. Guess you can blame terrible internet for that one. Yeah, it seemed like Saeed was about to get that move absolutely done on Steva, but Steva does manage to just teleport ahead of him, and will stay in P9 at the moment. Meanwhile, DDK now. Oh, and very interestingly, it seems like Trems is going to be one of the first few drivers out of the top 5 that didn't pit to come into the pits to switch off of that medium tire compound, possibly looking for an undercut as well. It seems like nobody else really following suit at the moment. Will Rigo follow suit? No, he will not. He decides to continue on as well. And Trems now, after his pit stop, will obviously lose a considerable amount of positions. And Nikudza setting the fastest lap time of the race with a 1:18.4, absolutely shattering the previous lap time, fastest lap time. And promoting himself up very, very nicely there. Currently in P6. So some promising lap times from him. And Trems now switches over to the hard tire compound, and most likely will be using this hard tire compound for the rest of the 19 laps and trying to make it to the end. A little bit below halfway through this race, and most of these drivers now have created substantial gaps to one another. Obviously, that doesn't mean that's it's not great news for us, as we don't get to see some action-packed racing, as we see Steva looking towards diving down the inside of Przemu. I was as Stable was about to completely prove me wrong there. Oh, and he does unfortunately brake late and collides with Przemu, and Przemu is unfortunately spun out. He's definitely not going to be happy about this. He's going to try to straighten his car out without damaging it, and unfortunately for Przemu, he's going to lose out massively on multiple positions. Now Jim coming into the pits to change off of his 16-lap-old tires. DDK deciding to stay out a lap further. But what's interesting is we'll have to see now, where does Jim come out in comparison to Trems. Trems obviously now coming through the final corner out on track and now heading down the pit straight. Will he be able to catch up to Jim? It doesn't seem like he will be able to. That undercut did not help him at all, and now he's going to stay in P7 behind Jim. That was a very unfortunate incident there involving Przemu. And let's look at me, I've already forgotten who it was. I believe it was Steva, who has come into the pits and by the looks of it has switched onto a fresh set of medium tires. If it wasn't Steva, then of course my bad for throwing the blame on you. I just don't remember who it was involved in that incident. But interestingly enough, DDK, Jack, and Rigo being the only drivers out at the moment who haven't come into the pits at the moment, who haven't come into the pits to switch off of their tires. Obviously, Jack and Rigo were on the hard tires from the beginning, but surprisingly, DDK hasn't decided to switch off of those mediums just as yet. Deciding that he wants to keep them rolling for at least one more lap. And will he come into the pits this time around? No, he will not, deciding to avoid the pits entirely. So DDK really pushing the life on those tires. Invite to Nikadza. Did he disconnect? Oh, it looks like he did. Oh no. I will try to invite him as soon as I can. There we go. I did send him an invite, so hopefully he should be able to join us very, very soon. Unfortunately for him that he disconnected. He's currently in P5 and driving a fantastic race for himself. Now riding on board with Rigo, currently in P4, 17-lap old hards are his tires. He does have Jaguar in front of him, and it doesn't look like he's really going to be able to catch up to Jaguar either. Of course, that soft tire advantage is absolutely massive. And riding on board with Nikadza, it seems like things are about to go really badly for him as Jim is now catching up to him, and in no time whatsoever it looks like he's going to be able to make the move stick and promotes himself up into P5. Nikadza unfortunately hasn't joined back the session just as yet. And now he has. Let's go. Luckily for him, he only loses out on one position, so not a whole lot lost. And now DDK deciding to come into the pits finally. So in lap 18 of 35, DDK has decided that enough is enough, and now he wants to switch off of his tires. Jack, as well with his 17-lap old hards, also coming in for his pit stop at the moment. Rigo obviously opting to stay out at the moment, and Jaguar currently now leading this race on his 6-lap old softs. Tires which obviously I doubt are not going to be making it towards the end of this race. And Nikadza, of course, now back in control of his car, currently sitting in P4 very comfortably with his 6-lap old mediums. Though I'm not too sure if Nikadza, this is the, is there a way I can check? Or I'll have to go into the race directory, won't I? So Nikadza has moved on to a second set of mediums, so he will be needing to make another pit stop very, very soon. Obviously, currently sitting in P4 very comfortably, but of course, after needing to make another pit stop, we'll be keeping an eye on him to see how many positions he might potentially lose out in then. We're looking at Rigo, of course, roughly 5/10 behind the race leader. Doesn't look like he's going to be able to do much from there. Trems, meanwhile, in the Red Bull, slowly trying to close that gap to Nikadza as well. Only 1 second and a tenth off the pace for P4. And yeah, this is what we were talking about earlier, where the gaps between the drivers have substantially increased. So there's obviously not a whole lot of action-packed racing in store for us right now, but of course the safety car can always turn that around. So when will Rigo come into pit? That's the big question. Trem's now bringing the gap down to roughly 8.5 tenths. Meanwhile, Jack, who did start near the front of the grid, currently in P8, unfortunately, after he had to make his pit stop, of course. Obviously didn't get the chance to pit under the virtual safety car as some of the other drivers did, but he does manage to set a purple sector 1, which could be terrifying for the drivers up ahead. But with, of course, 15 laps left to go, there's still a ton of time for Jack to fight back and fight towards the front of the grid. Seeing as how close the whole grid is to each other, they're only roughly 2 seconds or 1.5 seconds off the pace from each other. Rigo now deciding to come into the pits. So obviously this is going to now promote Nikudza into P3, Jim into P2, Trems into P4. And of course, the story is far from being over. As Jack, as we saw, he set a purple sector 1, sets a fastest lap time of the race with a 1:17.9. A super rapid lap as compared to the rest of the drivers. So of course they're all going to be looking at that and be knowing that Jack is not playing around, as he's already a 10th behind someone else. And unfortunately, Jack has spun out. It seems to be that the commentator curse caught up to him as well, and Jack unfortunately spins his car out and comes out in P9 right behind Shadow. And once again, he's going to have to slowly fight up towards the front of the grid. I didn't mean to curse you. I didn't mean to curse you like that, Jack. I'm terribly sorry. But we'll bring our attention towards Jim now, who's currently in P2 on his 4-lap-old hards, chasing Jaguar, who's on his 8-lap-old softs. 2.5 tenths separating both these drivers, and it doesn't look like Jaguar really has a whole lot left in those tires to help him defend from the AlphaTauri of Jim. Obviously, Red Bull and its sister team fighting it out one-on-one with each other for the lead of the race. And Jim trying to set himself up and get a great run out of the final corner. DRS wide open. Jaguar is going to try to go defensive with the inside line to help break the toe from Jim. But Jim now pulling around the outside with the fresher set of tires. Well, who will come out ahead? And it looks like Jaguar, with those 9-lap-old softs, is going to be able to hold that position for now, as Jim unfortunately locks up, heading down into turn 1. And now Jim now trying to make the move right back, as there's a collision between both drivers. And Jim absolutely sends it into the side of Jaguar. But he does manage to make the move stick and promotes himself up into P1. That was very unclean racing from Jim. We already saw the incident with him involved in turn 1. And I'm sure after this time around, once again, Jaguar is not going to be pleased with him whatsoever. Said, on the other hand, 3.5 tenths, or sorry, 5 tenths now behind DDK. This is for P5 in this race. And of course, we saw Jaguar and Jim getting into a scuffle of their own, and now Trems 5.5 tenths behind Nikudza, who has been closing the gap to Jaguar himself. So of course now the Alpine driver has to be sandwiched between both the Red Bulls. It'll be interesting to see how he handles this particularly pressuring situation, as Jack picks up a 3-second time penalty for multiple warnings, and we can see Jaguar now heading into the pits. Whether that's because of damage or whether that's because of a new tire change, I'm guessing it's mainly because of tire changes. And now Nikudza gets promoted up into P2. Trems slowly gaining out on the Alpine. Was thinking about maybe sending it down the inside, but decides to be more reservant with his approach. And now with DRS once again wide open, we can see Nikudza getting a bit squarely on the exit there. But Trems too far back at this current moment to send a move on the Alpine driver. Decides to stay in P3 at the moment. Meanwhile, P-Shadow getting extremely close to Samet by the looks of it. Both drivers separated by only roughly 3 tenths. It's kind of the similar. It's basically what's going on with Trent and Nikudza, but near the back of the grid, as the Cunning Fern picks up a 5-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane. And already we can see that gap between Jim and Nikudza beginning to expand, as it's gone up to 3.2 seconds. But Trem's not relenting off of the Alpine just as yet. This is for the second step of the podium, so of course all to play for here. Lap 23 of 25, only 12 more laps left to go. Why not make the move early? DRS now wide open for Trems as we ride on board with him and we see how quickly he's beginning to gain on the Alpine. He didn't send it down into turn 1 last time around. Will he send it down this time? No, he will not. Trems decides to stay behind for the current moment, trying to force Nikudza into some sort of mistake. But Nikudza keeping his cool as much as possible, retaining P2 at the moment. Looking down the grid, we can see Samet and Rigo coming into a battle of their own. Both Jack and Rigo currently sitting P6 and 7 respectively in the Mercedes. Samet would be more than happy to try to spoil that party for them. And despite his best efforts, it doesn't look like Trems is really able to force Nikudza into a mistake. But now coming through sector 2 and 3, the tight, twisty section of this track, it can get sometimes extremely difficult to follow a car so closely. And as we can see here, Trems is now beginning to slowly lose out time exactly in this area. But assuming that he can keep that gap to roughly 4 to 5 tenths heading towards the DRS straight, I doubt there's going to be a whole lot Nikudza is really going to be able to do to prevent Trems from getting past him. But we'll see on this occasion now, as Trems is roughly 4 tenths behind Nikudza. And now heading down towards the start-finish line with DRS wide open, riding on board with Trems. He's going to slowly start once again gaining on Nikudza. We saw the gap was roughly 4 tenths, and 100% the Alpine driver is going to be using his battery to try and keep that Red Bull driver at bay. So once again, for another lap, Trems is going to have to stay patient behind the Alpine. Riding on board with Rigo, it seems like he was going side by side with Lix and Jack at the moment, and it looks like Jack isn't really going to be fighting this position too hard with Rigo either. Jack decides to let Rigo go through, and Rigo now gets promoted up into P6. It's really through sector 2 and 3, Trems loses out on a whole lot of time to Nikudza. And it's really in this sector we can see DDK now beginning to close that gap to Trems. So things getting a bit scary for the Red Bull driver as he now has to look in his front and rear view mirrors. Obviously, having a Williams filling up your rear view mirror, and then having the Alpine in front of you not moving any further. And we have a yellow flag in sector 2. It seems to be the Ferrari that has stopped out on track. And now, will DK or Trems be able to overtake each other? Trems now getting extremely close to Nikudza. Will he send it down the inside? Of course he will. Trems with the Red Bull sends it down the inside of Nikudza. And Nikudza getting a beautiful switch around move done right on the Red Bull as there's collision between DDK and Trems. Trems tried to shut the door on DDK, who was already there. Luckily for us, there hasn't been a major incident involving both drivers, and they haven't. It doesn't look like they suffered from massive amounts of damage either. But that was extremely scary there as P3 and P4 nearly had taken each other out. Trems is going to need to be a bit more careful, and I know he's made a mistake and he's about to lose out on a position, but to take out the driver right behind you is not the solution there. Only 9 more laps left to go in this race. Not a whole lot longer now. We can see DK really sticking with Trems this time around. Does not want to let that Red Bull go whatsoever. Obviously for DDK, he'd be wanting to get past this Red Bull as soon as possible. He is on a 3-lap fresher tire set. So of course DDK would want to use this to his advantage. Ooh, gets a bit squirrely on the exit there. As we can see, Nikudza now actually deciding to go into the pits, realizing those 13-lap-old mediums will not make it to the end, take him to the end of the race. And now DDK with DRS wide open and empty Trems right in front of him, heading down towards turn 1. Will DDK send it down the inside? He does brake extremely late as there's massive collision between the Williams and the Red Bull once again. These two drivers can't seem to avoid each other tonight. And now DDK with the inside line sends it down the inside to this long left-hander, and the wheels of the Red Bull and the Williams surely do come in contact with each other. But DDK with that inside line and now the outside line does manage to make that move stick and promotes himself up into P2. Trems unfortunately drops down into P3. We can see Saeed now closing the gap to Rigo. Not too sure when he got past Jack, but he did. And now it seems like Saeed with his 14-lap-old hearts wants to be fighting for a possible podium position as well. The gap being roughly 9/10, of course. So we saw earlier how, of course, DDK did manage to get past Trems fairly easily, but Trems obviously not relenting up either. Only a few laps older are his tires as compared to DDK's, and now with DRS once again wide open, he's very far back, but DDK does have that flashing red light behind him signifying less than 10% ERS, as Jack unfortunately picks up another 3-second time penalty, and we have a full-fledged safety car in this race, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not entirely too sure why. It seems to be because of Jack driving the wrong way, as he gets unfortunately disqualified from the session for driving the wrong way. And now we have a full-fledged safety car in this race. So lap 28 of 35, this is exactly what I was talking about earlier. Things can go from bad to worse for a lot of these drivers really, really quickly. And for some of them, this is an absolute life-send, as a godsend, as Steva now becomes one of the first few drivers to head into the pits along with Zab and Seb. All most likely switching on to the faster compounded tires, of that being the softs, of course. And yes, that does seem to be the case. We're riding on board with Jim, who is currently 5.3 seconds ahead of his ahead of P2. Will your race leader come into the pits? Let's take a look and see. 6.7 seconds being the gap between P1 and P2. You can't make that shit up. Yeah, poor Nakadza. Yeah, absolutely. He only came in for his pit stop of the softs a lap prior. So you know that's definitely got a sting. And now we can see Jim now heading down the pit straight, coming in for his pit stop. What about DDK? DDK also following suit. Trems following suit. Will Rigo also join them? He's going extremely slowly, thinking about it by the looks of it. And yes, he will decide to go into the pits. It seems like Said is also going to be following suit. And without a surprise, it seems that most of these drivers are, as a matter of fact, going to be going in for their pit stops. Obviously painful for Nakadza, who did make his pit stop only a lap prior. Everyone should pit now. Stupid to stay out. Yeah, it would be a very unsensible decision to stay out. But now let's take a look at maybe some potential possessions Nakadza is going to be able to gain. And he does gain a significant amount of positions, promoting himself all the way up into P4. He only has Trems, DDK, and Jim, who've all now bunched up together behind the safety car in front of him. Lap 29 of 35, only 6 more laps left to go. And as we ride on board with Jim, he's going to be running us through the safety car, of course. As we wait for the rest of the drivers to pack up right behind each other, it'll be up to Jim, once the safety car comes in, to go at a time he deems best to catch P2 off guard. And it'll be up to DDK to obviously try to stay as close to him as possible. What I'm realizing just now is, why is DDK on a medium set of tires? Has he already used up his softs? He hasn't even worn his softs yet, so why not just switch over to the soft tires? A bit of miscommunication there from the Williams pit crew, by the looks of it. I'm worried for him now, because Trems will easily swallow him whole if he's gotten the opportunity to. And who's to say Nakadza won't do the same? Nakadza got the strategy right without the safety car, and assuming he navigates the traffic safely, he could have won. I mean, Jim has been on an absolute tear, I'll be very honest. It's been, watching his performance, he's obviously a quick driver to be fighting near the front of the grid, and all credit to him for being as fast as he is, and pulling away from DDK and Trems as he did earlier in the session. But I still can't get over the fact that he did kind of completely send it into turn 1 in lap 1, and then just managed to reset the track absolutely immediately to retain staying in P1. It's just a bit ridiculous, but alas, this is the situation that we're in at the moment. As a significant amount of cars have now caught up to the safety car. It seems to be only Jaguar and DDK out on track who haven't gone, and who are on the medium set of tires. So we'll obviously ride on board with Jim as he runs us through the safety car, and then when he decides to go is when we'll go back under race conditions. And in lap 30 of 35, race control has given us the update that the safety car is going to be coming in at the end of this lap. So now it's up to Jim to massively slow down his car and go at a time that he deems best, obviously bunching up the rest of the grid together and trying to catch P2 off guard. We can see DDK trying to stay as close to P1 as possible so that he can try to catch him out whenever he can. We're right on board of this restart through DDK's perspective to get a better idea of when Jim decides to go. And now heading through the final two corners in Sector 3. Jim still hasn't decided to go, and now he actually has decided to go quite considerably early by the looks of it. And now heading down through the final corner, Jim is going to be staying in P1 by the looks of it, but will he be able to retain that position till the end of turn 1? It does seem to be the case, as the drivers, of course, won't have DRS on each other. And unfortunately for Trems, it looks like he was massively caught off guard, and unfortunately is going to be trying to catch up to DDK, of course. Looking down the grid, of course, all the drivers now who were bunched up together get multiple overtaking opportunities. As we can see, the Mercedes of Rigo getting extremely squarely on that exit there. And now Saeed trying to send it around the outside. Unfortunately, can't make the move stick. Stays in P6 at the moment. And with these drivers so closely bunched up together, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a bit of incidents involving each other, as there's nobody spinning out at that infamous curb. And they all seem to have come through very, very nicely and very cleanly. It seems to be a very clean safety car restart, thankfully. No drivers sending it into the rear ends of others, so that's always good to see. Now we can see Rigo trying to catch up to Nikudza as much as possible, who is roughly, unfortunately, 1.4 seconds back on P3 at the moment. He just needs that extra bit of pace in those last 4 laps to maybe end up on the podium. As Jim now sets the fastest lap time of the race with a 1:17.3. But DDK being on the medium tires could actually prove to be extremely beneficial to Jim, assuming that Jim can continue to pull away on his soft tire compounds and those mediums will hold up Trems. We may be looking at a race pretty much set in stone already, as Jim has already increased the gap between him and DDK to roughly a second. And Rigo not trying to leave any room to spare between him and Nikudza. Obviously being sandwiched between the Alpines, does not like the position he's in at the moment. We're trying to get past him as soon as possible, and in the cleanest fashion possible, as I would like to hope to imagine. As there seems to be a 3-way race over here, and we can see Jaguar trying to send it down the inside of Samet, send it down the inside of Steba, and unfortunately he's unable to do so. Will drop down into P10 with his 15-lap-old mediums, as he's deciding to let the Ferraris and a bunch of drivers go through. It doesn't look like he's really looking to fight near the front of the grid, as Jaguar is going extremely slowly, and it seemed like there's a massive incident involved over there. I'm not too sure what just happened. It seemed like Jaguar was going extremely slowly, and now race control has given us the update that the DRS has been enabled for the final 2 laps here at Hungary. Trems obviously 6.5 tenths behind DDK at the moment. Will be looking to make this overtake as soon as possible. Obviously no DRS this time around, but the next time they come around through the DRS zone, their flaps will open up, allowing them to gain that extra top speed. And for a race which has been overall a pretty uneventful one, unfortunately, it sure is coming down to the final 2 laps, where the most action seems to be taking place, as Rigo looked at possibly looking to get past Nikudza as soon as possible, but unfortunately he's going to have to stay behind him at the moment, and this opens up a window of opportunity for Saeed for a possible overtaking opportunity. Oh, and I'm not too sure what happened between Trems and DDK there. It seems like Trems was involved in some sort of incident on his own, and he's dropped out of the DRS zone of DDK. Riding on board with Rigo now as he's trying to keep up with Nikudza as much as possible. And he gets a fantastic run out of that corner, obviously having his soft tires 2 laps quicker. And around the outside, Rigo manages to make a fantastic move there on Nikudza and manages to promote himself up into P4. But is it a bit too late of a move? Will Nikudza have DRS on Rigo, and it doesn't look like he will, as a matter of fact. And now we can see Saeed getting extremely involved. Now Nikudza trying to send it around the outside of Saeed. Both drivers coming into a battle with each other. This opens a great opportunity for Saeed as he's looking to maybe take advantage and capitalize of both these drivers coming into a battle with each other. And now Nikudza once again around the outside trying to make a fantastic move on Rigo. But Rigo closing that door off and staying in P4. This is obviously the penultimate lap of this race. We saw some great overtaking opportunities from Nikudza. Unfortunately, he's not able to get Rigo back on this occasion. But now, interestingly enough, Trems has brought himself comfortably within that DRS window. And now, with only a lap left to go, only one last time will they be experiencing DRS, Trems is going to try to close this gap to DDK as much as possible. Obviously, DDK on those 5-lap-old mediums has actually been able to hold off those 5-lap-old softs of Trems very, very nicely there. And obviously the gap to Jim himself being 1.7 seconds as well. You see Saeed only 0.3 behind his own teammate at the moment, as we have a yellow flag in sector 2 and 3, and it seems to be the Ferrari of Shadow. But Trems now 7.5 tenths behind DDK. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like he's going to be enough. He's using as much of his battery as he possibly can, but he just can't close that gap to him. Saeed, meanwhile, managing to get past his own teammate and promotes himself up into P5. Nikudza trying to stick with his teammate as much as possible, but unfortunately, it just doesn't seem like it's going to be enough. And now we're going to have to ride on board with them to see if there's any mistakes made by these drivers through the rest of the lap, which could allow one or two of them to maybe get past each other, but I'm assuming that's probably not going to be the case. Riding on board with Jim, he is 9 tenths ahead of DDK at the moment. We have another yellow flag in sector 3, and it seems to be Shadow once again. And through this penultimate lap, it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot many of these drivers could do. DDK has done a phenomenal job at holding Trems off. Trems was unfortunately dropped off by roughly 2.5 seconds. Shadow unfortunately retiring from the race. Rigo now roughly 3 tenths behind Trems. But of course, it's all about the driver who's managed to make it, who's honestly driven a fantastic race. Obviously, I have my comments and my thoughts about how he took the approach to the start of this race, but of course, you still can't take away from what was an overall consistent performance, which is the reason why Jim is going to be most likely coming across the line with no DRS, coming across the line and winning the Hungarian Grand Prix. DDK comes across the line and finishes in P2. We can see Rigo managing to get past Trems at the absolute last second and promoting himself up into P3. Trems finishes in P4, Saeed in P5, Nikudza, who seemed like he was on the verge of winning this race at one point, finishing in P6, Samet in P7, Bang Ever Seb, who started off on pole position, unfortunately coming across the line and finishing in P8, Jack King's in P9, we have Zabs in now P2, which says P9, but finishing in P10, and Prezemo, I'm guessing, was the one that finished in P10. What a fantastic race this was. I mean, a bit boring through the midway section of it, but overall it was great. Oh, by the way, can you make sure to cycle through the results at the end so it's easier for me to do standings? No, I don't think I will. If you want the finishing order, then you should just rewind the race. So then, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to be all from Tier 2. We'll take one quick look at the standings, the finishing order. Jim, congratulations to him for finishing in P1, obviously setting the fastest lap time of the race as well in the process. DDK finishing in P2. We have Rigo in P3. Saeed finishing in P4. Nikudza finishing in P5. And of course, we have Bang Everett, Seb, Jack King, Zab, Prezemu, and the Cunning Fern rounding off the top 10. And here's the rest of the standings for Blood so that he can do his little standing work for the tier. But yes, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for joining us. It has been a fantastic race. Wish it was a bit more eventful than that, but of course you can't complain when the final few laps were as entertaining as they were. we'll take a quick look at the standings, and we will see that the next time around that we go racing, oh sorry, this is sprint. The next time we go around racing will be, of course, the Spanish Grand Prix, Circuit de Catalunya. So I'm sure fantastic races in store for us then. So thank you all so much for joining me. This has been a fantastic session, and I hope to see you all next week.